major holidays up. Basically, the CDC defines 4 steps to food safety. Those are going to be clean, separate, cook, and chill. So for cleaning, let me see, I'm just trying to get my pictures minimized here. Okay. For cleaning, the first thing you're going to want to do is always start by washing your hands. We want to get off any germs that you have currently from coming back from the grocery store, touching door handles, anything in between before and when you start cooking. So you want to wash your hands for 20 seconds with soap and warm or cold water before, during, and after preparing food and before eating. Recommend that you wash your hands anytime you're switching from raw food to cooked food. If you're chopping chicken, you want to wash your hands after you start making or before you start making a salad so you don't cross-contaminate things of that nature. You want to wash your hands when you walk away from the area that you're preparing food and go to the bathroom or say go to a pantry. When you come back, you want to wash your hands before you start working with the food again. Um, so always wash your hands after handling uncooked meat like chicken, which I just mentioned, other poultry, also seafood, flour, or eggs. And we'll talk a little bit about more about flour in one of the coming slides. Wash your utensils, cutting boards, and countertops with hot soapy water after preparing each food item. Again, we don't want to cross-contaminate with any raw juices from meats. So your best option is to wash those countertops, but most importantly, wash your cutting boards and utensils before you start working with non-raw products. Second, you want to separate and don't cross-contaminate. And this goes into what I was just saying about working with raw meat and poultry and seafood. You want to keep their juices away from other foods. So when you go grocery shopping, make sure that you're not storing those raw meats or poultries above other things in your grocery cart. It's always a good idea to use those plastic bags that you use also for produce and put your container of meat or put your chicken, put those in the plastic bags before you take them home and are packing them with the rest of your groceries. Keep raw or marinating meat, poultry, seafood, and eggs separate from all other foods in the refrigerator. When we do restaurant inspections, one of our debit items is for storing raw items over ready-to-eat items. So for example, eggs. We always tell people put your eggs on the bottom shelf because if those eggs were to break and leak over something that's ready to eat, that's always going to be an issue that could cause you illness from the bacteria or viruses. You don't want something with raw meat juice or raw eggs. You don't want that dripping into a food that you're going to eat. Use one cutting board or plate for raw meat, poultry, and seafood, and a separate cutting board or plate for produce, bread, and other foods that won't be cooked. I'd also recommend that if you're using that one cutting board and you're preparing, say, beef, and then you're going to prepare some raw poultry after that, you're still going to want to wash your cutting board in between raw products. So not only do you want to wash it when you're prepping, say, raw chicken and then switching to cutting bread, you also want to wash between that raw beef and poultry and seafood. Third, we want to cook to the right temperature. Food is safely cooked when the internal temperature gets high enough to kill germs that can make you sick. You want to use a food thermometer. This is probably the most important part of making sure your food is cooked. Cooked to a safe temperature. Color and texture are not reliable indicators. An example would be steak or hamburger patties. Sometimes we order our steaks or our hamburgers rare or medium rare. Just because it's red may mean that it's still done. It's still reached the proper temperature, even though it looks undercooked, or vice versa. Safety versus doneness. Looking for visual signs of doneness could create overcooked food. So if you cook that food to a really high temperature, if you cook that food way, way longer than you need to just to make sure it's safe, you might actually overcook the food. And yeah, you'll be safe, but you're not going to have very good food. So cooking to the recommended temperatures from the FDA keeps food safe and will retain the quality. So you don't have to be worried about, I'm cooking this item to 165 degrees. Is that going to overcook it? No, it's not, because those temperatures that I'm going to discuss coming up are actually meant to retain the quality of the food as well as make it safe. So we'll take a quick look at thermometers. There's two different kinds. We have digital and we have dial thermometers. Digital is what we use for our health inspections when we go out to restaurants because they're instant read. I would recommend using a digital, most likely over a dial if possible. Dial thermometers still work, they're still fine, but it's going to take a lot longer to give you that reading on the temperature. In the meantime, when you're trying to take this temperature with your oven open or with your food product out of the oven, it's actually going to be dropping in temperature while you're waiting for this dial thermometer to read. So definitely recommend you go with the digital thermometer if you can. For cooking, how do I take a temperature? Well, temperature should be taken in the thickest part of the food. So in the picture of our turkey here, we want to take the temperature in the breast because this is going to be the part of the food that's going to take the longest to cook. It's the densest. It's going to give you the most accurate temperature reading of the overall doneness of the food. When you're cooking turkey, so specifically to Thanksgiving, when you're cooking your turkey, you're also going to want to take the temperature in three different places. You want to take the temperature in the thickest part of the breast, like I just mentioned, but you also want to take a temperature where the body and the thigh join, and also where the body and the wing join. And the reason for this is because these areas are dark meat, and dark meat actually takes a little bit longer to cook than white meat. So especially for poultry, this is the way you're going to want to take the temperatures. Stuffing. Stuffing is a special case. We always want to check the final cooking temperature of stuffing if it's cooked inside of the turkey. Just because your turkey was cooked to 165 degrees and is now safe doesn't mean that stuffing inside the turkey is safe. So we always want to make sure that we take the temperature in the stuffing, get that thermometer far enough into the stuffing in the turkey that it's going to give you a reading of 165 degrees. So we want 165 for the turkey itself, and we also want 165 for the stuffing. Yeah, and as I just mentioned, stuffing inside the turkey may not reach the same final temperature of the turkey. So what temperatures are safe to cook your foods to? Well, for whole cuts of beef, veal, lamb, and pork, we want to cook to 145. That temperature you'll see is a little bit on the lower side, but that reason is also because there's a 3-minute rest time included with this. So you can take your roast out of the oven at 145 degrees. Well, we still want to give it that we still want to give it that 3-minute rest time to actually get up to temperature. 145 for fin fish or until opaque. This is one case where you can actually look at the doneness of the food because the fish will be opaque when it's reached that 145 temperature or above. We want 160 degrees for ground meats. We also call them comminuted meats when we're doing our inspections. So this would be like ground beef, ground pork, ground chicken, meatball or meatloaf mix, any of those types of meats. All poultry, regardless of what it is going to be cooked to 165 degrees. 165 degrees is our temperature for leftovers. Any leftovers that you're reheating need to go to 165 degrees. This is the temperature that you're going to need to actually kill anything that has grown in the leftovers while they were sitting out in the meantime. Refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours of cooking to prevent poisoning. So this is the reason we want to cook our leftovers to 165. If those leftovers were sitting out for, say, an hour, or say the whole 2 hours, you have to reheat them to 165 in order to kill whatever was growing in the meantime. You want to divide large dishes into small portions to cool more efficiently. Wide, shallow pans, I recommend, or also a good thing to do is to use glass or metal if possible. Plastic tends to hold in heat a little bit more. So if you have glass dishes that you can cool your food in, that's usually more effective. Say no to raw dough. Everyone likes to lick the beaters and the batter. But raw eggs can contain salmonella. We kind of all know that. But also, I don't know how many people know that raw flour can also contain germs like salmonella and E. coli. The reason for this is because raw flour is not heat treated to kill these germs. So not only do you have an issue with the eggs, what if you use pasteurized eggs? Well, it's still not okay because that raw flour can still have germs in it. What about edible cookie dough? These doughs are made with pasteurized and heat-treated ingredients. So those containers of edible cookie dough that you do see at the stores are safe because they're specially made to be heat-treated and pasteurized. Chilling, the temperature danger zone. So in the chart on the right, you will see that our danger zone is between 40 and 140 degrees. This is the range that we do not want our food to be in. You can see at the top of the thermometer is more temperatures that we have already discussed about keeping your food at for hot holding, which would be 140, or your cooking temperatures for your food, which is 145 through 165. Your freezer temperature should always be 0 or below, but mainly we just want to make sure our foods are staying out of that danger zone. And the reason is because bacteria can multiply rapidly when left in the danger zone. Break down foods into small quantities and package in individual containers. Refrigerate perishable food within 2 hours. Keep your refrigerator at 40 degrees or below and your freezer at 0 degrees or below. I'm also going to talk briefly about thawing because there's a couple different ways that we can thaw. The first is in the refrigerator. I'd say that this is the recommended way to thaw. Take into account the time that you're going to need for that food to thaw and put it in your refrigerator. So it's got at least a day, it's got 2 days if it's a big item to thaw in time for whenever you need it. But I'd say in the refrigerator is probably the recommended method of thawing. You can also thaw in cold water, but this to me, I think is a little more difficult because if you're gonna thaw in cold water, you need to be really conscious of your temperature and your timing. You're gonna want to change that water every 30 minutes in order to thaw the food. So that's going to involve something like setting a timer or, keeping your eye on the clock to make sure you're changing that water every 30 minutes. So it's not exactly ideal. You can also thaw in the microwave. I'd say that's probably number 2 on my list for recommended ways of thawing. And that's about all I have tonight. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Seeing none, I guess I will leave it there and we can move on to our next presentation.
May unmute myself. So thank you, Nicole, for that. Sorry that you're not feeling well. Hopefully you can get some good sleep tonight. And if you want to go, we can try to help answer some questions afterwards if there are any, or we can try to get some answers to Mara and she can send them out to the group later. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Let's see if this worked here. Sorry. Of course, I can't tell which screen I'm sharing. Hang on. Sorry about that. Let me do this one more time. Didn't work.
The second one was perfect.
It was okay. I can Zoom. It's so hard to tell.
So hard.
When you're only on one monitor, you don't have two going. So
go to the next one.
Okay. Is it in full screen?
Perfect. Perfect.
Yes. All right. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Melissa Marquis. I'm the emergency response specialist for the health district, covering West Hartford and Bloomfield. So I was on a couple of months ago and talked to you guys about emergency preparedness, and that was a broader topic, just all things preparedness related, or most things preparedness related. We wanted to kind of focus in this time around, since we are entering the winter season. We wanted to talk a little bit more about how to stay safe throughout the winter, both personally, when you're at home, out in the community, etc. So as you can see on this slide, it's a little bit busy, and so I'm going to apologize first for that. We will cover just about all of these little topics on this slide, but just as is important to change out your carbon monoxide and smoke detector batteries twice a year. It's really good opportunity to take that time while you're doing those little preparations, just to change those batteries out, to also either, seasonalize your home, whether that's winterizing it and getting it ready for the winter, getting your chimney inspected, your furnace inspected, making sure you've got enough oil or gas available to get you through the winter season, making sure that you've got all the necessary equipment in the house to take care of normal everyday type of winter activities, whether it's snowfalls, ice, sleet, freezing rain, those types of events. And then, if there are, significant storms that cause power outages, what are the things that you are going to need to have in your home to keep you safe while there's power outages and potentially prolonged power outages. And so we want you to take the time now, before winter really sets in, to think through those items and figure out what is it that you might need to keep yourself and your family prepared should an emergency occur. So we'll transition a little bit over to just some general cold weather tips. So obviously we all know when it's getting cold outside, we tend to wear layers, dressing warmer, making sure that we've got the appropriate gear that we need to keep ourselves protected. And so that's going to include hats, scarves, mittens or gloves, thicker socks, perhaps, boots, preferably waterproof boots. So we want to make sure that you've got all those items available for you and your family, especially with your kids. Kids are outgrowing things so quickly these days. So you definitely want to make sure that they've got the appropriate sizes for this season. One piece of information that I want to make sure to share is that some people may not realize or know this, but you can lose approximately 40% of your heat that escapes from your head when it's not protected outside. So if you don't have a hat on, any kind of hat really, but something that's thicker layer, that's really, you're really at risk for losing a lot of body heat by not wearing something. So yes, it may mess your hair up for you ladies, but you'll be a lot warmer, trust me. And then obviously you want to make sure, as I mentioned, having gloves available, because your fingers and your toes particularly are much more sensitive to extreme temperatures. Even if you're outside for just 15 minutes or so, you can still develop frostbite to those digits or those extremities, and it can actually occur on your nose and your cheeks, exposed areas on your skin. So you definitely need to take steps to prevent that. And really just pay attention to what the weather forecasts are. Take a minute or two in the morning as you're getting ready for work or school, or to go out for the day. Make sure that you know how many layers you're going to need for that day. So hopefully you'll think of this slide as you try to figure out how to best dress for the day. So I mentioned just a little bit about frostbite, and I want to kind of talk and separate out what's the difference between frostbite and hypothermia, because they're not the same, but they can occur together. So frostbite is typically where, as I said, exposed skin is at most risk of developing, what do I want to call it, circulation issues due to the cold temperatures. And so if your face is not covered by a scarf, or your ears aren't covered by your hat, or you don't have gloves on, or your socks are wet, but you have boots on, all of those body parts can be affected. And so we want to make sure that again, you're prepared and you've got the right equipment and clothing to wear. So you want to look out for what are the signs and symptoms. So you want to look for redness or pain in any skin area. Usually that's the first telltale sign. Other signs might be some numbness or tingling in those areas that are exposed. Later signs, you might start to notice skin color changes. So it might go to like from a red now to white or gray or even purple looking skin. And then sometimes it can actually turn black, and that's, complete death that's dead tissue to that. And oftentimes there's not much recovery that can happen from that. So you definitely need to prevent that from happening. So how do you do that? So first aid, if you notice any of these signs or symptoms, warm up as quickly as you can. So go inside, basically. Make sure that you are putting your hands or feet or whatever body part is affected in warm water. That's very important. It cannot be hot, because then you're just exposing yourself to more tissue damage by a rush of blood flow to that area. So what happens with frostbite is that, or any time that your hands or your feet or extremities are cold, that's your blood vessels are constricting. And so they're going to spasm to try to push the blood flow from the lower extremities to the core, to your basically your torso area. So your heart, your lungs, your gut. That's what it's going to protect. So all the blood flow from your arms and legs are going to go to the core. And so you really need to keep yourself warm. And so that's why oftentimes you hear a lot of people saying, warm your core. So put, an extra layer, put a vest on over your core, because that really helps to protect those organs and keeps the blood flow going down to the extremities. Don't massage the area, because that can also cause more tissue damage, but just try to warm up gradually and slowly. Okay, so if that continues without intervention, you could actually lead right into hypothermia. You can also develop hypothermia without having frostbite, but it's in either case, they're both serious and they both require treatment medically. So hypothermia happens again when it's very cold temperatures, typically below 40 degrees, and particularly so if somebody is wet. So it could be that their clothing got wet from sweating or from rain or other type of moisture. And then it just sits there and they're still outside. And so it just cools them down even more. That's why it's really super important, particularly for your feet, is to have dry socks. Everybody always says, carry an extra pair of socks. That's why. So symptoms to look out for with adults would be, extreme shivering, being really super fatigued, exhausted. You may have some people actually acting confused and not knowing where they are, or maybe their speech is a little bit garbled. they might just be kind of going in and out of consciousness or just feeling very, very drowsy. With infants, it's going to be a little bit different. They're going to certainly have that very low energy like an adult would, but their skin's actually going to turn bright red, but it's going to be cold to touch. So because they have less body surface area compared to an adult, the blood flow plus their skin is thinner at that point. So you're going to see more of the blood flow happening. So first aid solutions, immediate medical attention, move them into a warm place as soon as possible, take off all the wet clothing, put a blanket around them, wrap them in lots of layers, give them some warm beverages if they're awake and able to drink okay. And you want to start to warm the core in the middle first. So as I said, kind of start layering on, shirts and sweaters and vests and coats right around that middle. Keep them warm and dry. If they're unconscious, check for a pulse, make sure that they're still breathing. If not, then begin CPR and obviously call 911. Generally, if a person's temperature is below 95, you want to seek medical attention for them. However, if they're acting completely normal, you might want to ask them, hey, what does your body temperature normally run? Because there are quite a few people, especially elderly people, that normally run a low body temperature, even at that 95 degrees. And so that's not going to be an emergency where they are going to need some assistance or medical assistance. So just as an FYI there. All right, shifting gears a little bit to snow removal. So this is another kind of hot topic in the wintertime. We certainly want to make sure that, obviously, as I said, you're staying warm, you're covering your hands, your head, and you're wearing appropriate footwear to actually be outside in the elements for hours on end, potentially. Depends on how big of a property you've got to shovel. A couple of things to help lessen your chances of injury or potentially even death. So we want to make sure that your muscles are getting warmed up before you start. So the warmer your muscles are, the more blood flow that's going through your body, the less chance of serious injury. You want to make sure that you're using proper body mechanics when you're actually doing the shoveling. So on average, one wet shovel of snow can actually be about 25 pounds. And so that can actually be pretty significant. And I have a little quote here. This from a recent study that indicated heavy snow of about 7 to 8 inches increases the risk of heart attacks among men by 16% and 34% increased risk of dying from a heart attack. And then go on to say that this cardiac risk exists also when using snow blowers, although the risk is not quite as high. So that's really significant to know. I think people don't realize how much of a workout you really get with shoveling or even snow blowing, but like I said, you're potentially out there for hours doing this repetitive, heavy lifting, and it's cold. You're not paying attention to the cold temperature because you're probably sweating, and now you're probably a little hypothermic, and your heart is stressed. You've got all these confounding factors, one on top of another. And by the time you start to feel symptoms such as chest pain, shortness of breath, or dizziness, it's, for some people, unfortunately, can be too late. And I have unfortunately lost a family member because of this. And he was snow blowing, and so he didn't even realize it. Like, you don't think that snow blowing is hard work, but middle-aged men can be particularly at risk. So really do please keep that in mind. Make sure that if you're home alone and you're doing this, make sure that you're taking your cell phone with you when you're outside. And as soon as, if you start to feel any of these symptoms, please stop, go inside, reassess your situation, see if just reducing your exertion will help to alleviate some of those symptoms. If it's not within a few minutes or any of those symptoms change or worsen, call 911 right away. Don't wait, just get that taken care of. Other things to keep in mind, particularly with using snow blowers, is, remember that it's a motor. And so snow blowers often get clogged with a lot of snow, chunks of ice, things that get in the way. And, even with turning the snow blower off and turning off the motor, people will either, unfortunately, put their hand in, unclog it, and then it kicks the motor back on, just enough to, catch their arm or their hand in there and cause serious damage. So you just really do need to really, really pay attention to what you're doing and be aware of your surroundings, be aware of any kids around playing in the snow while you're snow blowing, just be situationally aware. All right. So while you're out there doing all of this snow work, the other hazard that you want to consider is slips and falls. This is probably the most common injuries that occur during the winter time, because often there's black ice on the ground. You don't really know it. You might just think it's wet from snow melt or what have you. And as soon as you take that first step, if your center of gravity is off a little bit, there you go. You're down like that man in the first picture there. It just takes that one initial step. So what can you do to prepare for that, or to hopefully prevent it? So obviously we want to make sure that you're in a well-lit area, that if, let's say you're at home or a business, if you have sand or salt nearby, making sure that you put a lot of that down on the ground to help those well-traveled areas stay safe. You want to make sure that you're keeping your center of gravity about your just over your front leg. So kind of think like the picture of the penguin. Think like you're just kind of shuffling your gait. So small little steps, barely picking your foot up off of the ground, almost just like sliding, but not quite. Okay, so that's going to help to ensure that your legs don't split too much during your stride. And so that's typically when you're going to fall, is during that kind of mid stride. There are grips that are made for your shoes that have little metal studs on them. So it's kind of like snowshoes for your feet. There's a bunch of different companies. I have a pair called Yak Tracks. Those work great. So if you know that you're going to be outside walking on possibly untreated pavement, or you're out doing the shoveling or what have you, I definitely put them on. It's saved me numerous times. So it's really helpful. So in terms of emergency preparedness, as I said, I did do a talk here a couple of months back, and we talked about all these different items on here. So I'm not going to recap, but if you are interested, I know that it is still a link on the Bloomfield Library YouTube page. So you can go and search for that if you want more details. But these are some questions that I want you to kind of think through, over the next couple of weeks. So do you have a preparedness kit at home or in your car? If not, do you know what goes in those kits? And do you really need to have one? So I put a link on here. There's a website called www.ready.gov. They're a wonderful resource by FEMA, which gives lots of checklists and tips and recommendations on how to be prepared for you and your family. So it's really important. Lots of great information. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. There's, if you or somebody that you know, that you live with, that has some kind of special needs, some functional needs, they need some assistance navigating or moving around the house, what have you, where they need, electricity for breathing machines or medications. There are registries or databases that local police or fire departments try to maintain of residents within that district who have these types of access or functional needs. And so what you can do is call them and ask them if they have this type of a database on file, and that you would like to share either your or your loved one's information. That way, in case of a bad emergency or power outage, they can reach out to you to find out what are your needs and how do they need to prioritize you, over other things, other emergency needs. I can't say that, they'll be able to immediately access you, but they've got that information on hand, and they will do their best to try to accommodate your needs in a quick manner. So other considerations to think about is, if you take medications, do you have enough supply for up to 2 weeks of medications at home in case you can't get a refill from your pharmacy? Do you have enough gas in your car? Generally, especially in the wintertime, people don't think about this. So I like to recommend keeping a half a tank of gas in your car, because for these crazy winter storms that happen, sometimes we've experienced this numerous times, where these storms come midday. Everybody's out at work, and then all of a sudden everybody has an early dismissal from school and work. Everybody's leaving all at the same exact time. Well, what happens? The roads get clogged and nobody can go anywhere. And then there's accidents and spin outs and road closures, and then you're stuck. You're literally stuck. It's happened to me a couple of times on the highway. And it's dangerous, because then you're just sitting there in a car stuck. You can't go anywhere, and it's cold outside, and you only have a quarter tank of gas. That's not going to keep you warm for very long. Your car is going to stall out if you use it all, and then you're going to be cold. And then what? Do you have a blanket in your car? Maybe not. It's one of the things to consider. All right. So keep that in mind. So I definitely recommend generally trying to aim for at least a half a tank of full all the time. And then again, considering, having extra gas or oil for your generator at home if you have one as well. Consider, do you have enough water or canned goods at home in case of a power outage? Can you manage at home for a couple of days without having to go to a shelter, or, go to a family or friend's house or a hotel even? So trying to kind of stick it out at home. Do you have what you need to do that? And then the bigger last two pieces here, having an emergency contact list is critically important. Having one printed is even better than just relying on your cell phone, because guess what? If your battery dies on your cell, there's power outage, and you don't have a solar charger, you have no way of accessing your phone to make any calls. And so either memorize those numbers or print them off somewhere and keep a copy with you in a car or something. So in terms of having a car kit, I definitely recommend this for the winter time. Particularly, it's good to have one all the time. But for the winter, there's a few other items that I'd recommend, including that blanket, like I mentioned. And it doesn't have to be like a down blanket. They have these tiny little space blankets. They're just made of aluminum foil, basically, that fold up to nothing, probably thinner than your wallet. And you can just stick it in your glove box, and that you wrap that around you, and that will help to retain your body heat and keep you warm. Make sure you've got a flashlight. It's good practice to keep a shovel in your car. And if you're not sure why you would need a shovel, just consider you're getting stuck. You got stranded because you've got front wheel drive and you're trying to turn a corner and you hit a snow rut, and now you can't get out, and your tires just keep spinning and spinning and spinning. And people are trying to help you, but your tires just keep spinning because there's no traction. Well, you could try to dig it out with a shovel if you have one, or something to resemble a shovel. But if that's not enough, what else do you need? You might want to consider keeping a bag of either cat litter or like coarse sand that you can put behind your back tires, or actually behind all four tires is best. And hopefully that will give your tires just enough traction to get up and over that rut. So I would definitely recommend those two items, particularly for the winter. You want to make sure you've got your jumper cables, obviously, first aid kit, and also considering adding water and snacks in the car. Just as I said, in case you do get stranded and you're unable to get out of a traffic jam until the road's cleared, but that could take hours. And if you're already trying to rush home from work and now you've missed dinner because you're stuck in the car, especially if you've got hangry kids in the car, you'll want something to do for them. So those are all just good considerations to keep. So in terms of weathering through a power outage due to severe weather at home, so same type of tips: have flashlights with spare batteries, avoid candles if at all possible, and if you can't, then make sure that you don't leave the room while the candles are burning. Most important out of here is practicing gas safety. So never, ever, ever use a propane gas inside, whether it's a heater or a gas grill to cook for you. Reason is due to carbon monoxide. And so that's number one risk. And that goes along with using a generator as well. Generators put out a lot of carbon monoxide, and so you really need to make sure that that is in a well ventilated area. So outside your garage, definitely not inside a garage, definitely not near any open windows or open doors to the house. As far away from the house as your cables will allow, basically. If we'll go into signs for carbon monoxide poisoning in the next slide, but if you do suspect that, call 911, get out of the house immediately. Okay. Best thing you can do is to get out of the source of the carbon monoxide, get in fresh air, and that will help to reduce the burden in your bloodstream. All right. Other tips in terms of general food safety. So if you're concerned, if it's been several hours to days of power outage, I'd take the general stance: when in doubt about food safety, throw it out. So if you're not sure if it's still good, if it's within that danger zone window that Nicole talked about, if you don't have a thermometer available right at the moment that you're testing it, it's kind of useless. So just throw it away. Yes, it's money out the window, but it's also your life potentially in your own hands. So be cautious with that. And, obviously check on your elderly or disabled neighbors, and just be a good neighbor in general. Just get out and see if anybody needs help. Last good tip here, use an all-weather radio if you've got one. That will help with, most of them are hand crank radios, so you don't even need batteries, although they do run on batteries if you have them. But they do run on hand crank power. Some of them have a solar pack on it, so you might even be able to charge your cell phone on it. They also have a little flashlight, and obviously AM, FM radio stations, so that you can tune in and listen to updated news briefings. So that those are very good tips to have. Again, here's some additional generator safety. So I already talked about not using it inside, staying away from open windows, doors, and outside of the garage. Other tips here: you really want to make sure that you're plugging it into the correct outlet. Most generators do use I think it's a 220 outlet cord, and so you need to make sure that you're using the right voltage cord and not plugging it into the wrong outlet. Be careful when using it outside in the rain. Try not to put it inside of a puddle, obviously, because it's electrified. So you want to reduce any risks of electricity or electrocution. Make sure that you're maintaining it before you have to use it. Check it, do some tests on it a couple of times a year. Make sure that you don't store it keeping fuel inside of it, because otherwise it will basically gunk it up, and then it won't be useful. You'll end up needing a new carburetor and costing a lot of money to repair it. And then it's not going to be available when you do need it. So definitely need to maintain it. Okay, so in terms of the carbon monoxide, definitely want to make sure that, as I said, changing out your batteries. But first, if you are going to use any kind of gas in your house at all, including a generator, you have to make sure that you have a CO detector in the home. Change your batteries twice a year. You can call the fire department with help with smoke and CO detectors. So if you have questions about them, they love to come out and educate and provide some for you if you don't have any. I know that every home is required to have smoke detectors, and I know that they're definitely at least recommended for CO detectors. So if you have any gas equipment in the house. So what are the symptoms of CO poisoning? They're really subtle. And so that's why people get into trouble with this oftentimes. A lot of people will develop like a mild headache at first, and they'll just really dismiss it as nothing out of the ordinary. Most people get headaches. It's kind of common, unfortunately. But as that goes on, they might start to feel other symptoms like feeling a little short of breath or feeling really drowsy and just like very low energy. Some people might actually start to feel a little bit dizzy. And so again, unfortunately, a lot of times what happens when you're starting to have all of those types of symptoms, even if it's not all of them, but a few of them, what's the first thing you're going to want to do? Go lay down and take a nap, right? Generally that's the right thing to do, but it's the wrong thing to do when you're using any kind of gas equipment, whether it's generators or anything that has gas in the home. If you're uncertain, just make sure that it's on the forefront of your mind of I wonder if this could be CO poisoning. Because unfortunately, if you fall asleep and there's nobody else around, or if other people are feeling similarly, there's a chance that you guys might all fall asleep, and some may not wake up. It can be deadly. So it's very important to make sure that you're very aware of what the symptoms are, and also very aware of what to do next. So you want to make sure, as I said, as soon as you start to notice those symptoms and put two and two together, oh, the generator's going, now I have a headache and I feel a little nauseous right now. Oh, I wonder if it's CO. I wonder, oh, there's a window open. Oh, shoot. Oh, we got to get outside. Turn off the generator, go outside, call 911 and get yourself checked out. Because you really do need to get that medical evaluation done to see whether or not you need oxygen treatment or in severe cases, hyperbaric treatment. So you definitely need to take action here. You can also call Poison Control Center, and that number is listed on the screen, but 911 is probably going to be your best, fastest route. And so, as I said, change out your batteries every year. Twice a year is actually recommended. And install them on every floor of your home, especially outside of your bedrooms, and by the closest entrance to where you're using your generator. So wherever that cord is coming in, wherever it's closest to your point of entry in the house, put one there. All right. So in terms of staying connected during an emergency, there's lots of notifications that may come out. Usually the media is one of the first ones where we hear of whether it's a statewide emergency or even a townwide emergency. But there's also these kind of reverse 911 types of notifications that residents may get. And so Bloomfield has one, it's called the Code Red system. And so there's a hyperlink here for Bloomfield that you can click on that and register yourself to receive emergency notifications for any townwide emergencies. All right. And then there's also a statewide Connecticut alert system at the bottom of the slide. So they're separate systems, but they work similarly. And then the other sections on the right side of the screen, we already talked about the all hazards weather radio. The emergency alert system is what these notification systems are. Media, other TV broadcasting, highway messaging is another good way of telling people stay off the highway, or the highway's closed, or there's beware of numerous trees down or power lines down, that type of information. So just be situationally aware. That's my best tip for anything preparedness related. Just be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what's happening within your town, your community, within the state. That's really the best way that you are going to be able to stay on top of things. All right. So that's really it for me as well. So here's my information. So I'll be glad to stop sharing here. Be glad to take any questions that you guys